You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and federally certified veteran-owned small business. I'm your host, Robert Bain, along with our producer, Chris Spangle. Our podcast is featured on the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact us at chris@leadersandlegends.net. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. We don't do many podcasts like the one that you're going to hear today. Mostly what we do is personality-based or with authors, but this is an issue-based podcast in many ways, interview, and it's even about a subject where I'm hoping that I don't get stones thrown at me by my illustrious guests, but I promise to be cordial even if I'm being a snot.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Chelsea Haring-Cozzi serves as the Chief Executive Chief Executive Officer for the Coalition of Homelessness Intervention and Prevention, CHIP, the lead agency for the Indianapolis Continuum of Care, and the Streets to Home Indy initiative. They're located in Fountain Square, as I recall.
We are.
2 blocks from where you are right now.
Absolutely.
And about 2 blocks from my house. Before joining CHIP, Chelsea worked in community impact at United Way of Central Indiana. She's had several gigs. She holds a master's degree in public administration and a PhD in public policy and political science from Michigan State University. Were you there for some good basketball years?
Absolutely. I was there the second year after Tom Izzo came in.
Really?
Absolutely.
That long ago?
Mm-hmm. It is that long ago.
Yamahama.
It's not the way to start off, Robert.
Do what?
That's not the way to start off.
It surprised me too.
Thank you. We're all surprised. What was your dissertation?
It was looking at regime change around the charter school movement and how issue framing brought various coalitions together to move school choice legislation forward.
What'd you think of Marshawn Wally's editorial in the Star? Did you see it?
I have seen it. And I mean, I think there's some really fascinating things happening right now in education and in Indianapolis in particular.
Yeah.
And I won't pretend to be an expert on the issue here.
Done a lot of PR for charter schools, including closing 2 or 3 of them. It's rough, but compared to where it was when, I hate to say I was a kid, the choice is amazing. Choices you have are amazing. Did you ever hook up with and hang out with Suzette Hackney while she was here? Remember, she used to write for the Star?
I don't think I did. And a lot of my work was in Michigan, which was one of the first states that passed some of the charter school legislation back in the 90s.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Yep.
right. Engler.
Yep, under
John
Governor
Engler.
Engler. Yep.
Anyway, Suzette Hackney is a Michigan State grad.
Oh, well, go Spartans.
As is Jamel Hill. If you see her on TV or
Okay.
used to be on ESPN. Joining us is Emmy Hildebrand. She is Helping Veterans and Families' first female Chief Executive Officer. She brings more than 20 years of experience serving veterans, including nearly 13 years at HVAF. She went to DePaul
even say
University and had the privilege to join the staff of the man,
Very true.
United States Senator Richard G. Lugar. She went on to work for the Statesman after graduation for 10 years as his military and veterans affairs coordinator. She also has her MBA through the University of Southern Indiana. Thank you both for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
It's a Friday afternoon. It's the last Friday before the end of session, so we're not going to bury the lead. We're going to talk about this first, if that's okay. I tried to print a couple of stories, but my printer, as is often the case, doesn't work. What'd you say? We do? Did I pay for it? Sounds like an East Side discount to me. I haven't paid for it yet, but it's here. Talk to us about the legislation that's coming through the Indiana General Assembly, authored by Senator Cindy Rasco, and what that means, what the legislation would entail, and your take on it.
So this is the second year this legislation has been introduced at the Indiana General Assembly that adds a criminal penalty for those that are living unsheltered. The legislation proposes that law enforcement would give kind of a move along order to someone who is publicly camping or sleeping on public lands. And if they do not move within 48 hours, they can be cited with a C misdemeanor, which is 60 days in jail or up to a $500 fine. We opposed it last year, and we were grateful that the majority of the General Assembly felt the same way, that it's cruel to punish people who are unsheltered because there's no space for them to go. It seems to have more momentum this year, but we're working hard to make sure that our legislators understand that homelessness is complex, but adding additional barriers like fines and criminal records is not helpful to people when they seek housing.
Why do you think it has more momentum this year?
I'm not sure. I know the people that are pushing it feel like it's unsafe and inhumane to let people sleep outside. And Chelsea and I feel the same way. I think there's just disagreement on the solutions and how to best serve these individuals.
Chelsea?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is an urge to want to do something, right? That people continue to see people experiencing homelessness in communities and feel compelled to do something. And that's what we hear a lot at the State House, particularly over the last couple of years, is we feel compelled to action, we want to do something, but they don't know what the right thing to do is or what to do. And so I think that's where some of this is coming from of saying we want a compassionate solution, we want an effective solution, we want something that is going to actually solve the problem, but there's not a clear understanding of what that is. And so we have been really advocating to be at the table, to be part of that problem solving, to bring those solutions. We have evidence-based things that we know are working in our communities that we've had a hard time scaling them to meet the actual need. I'm excited that folks at the State House want to get involved and to say, we want to help. It's just right now, they're not hitting the mark. They're not providing the right kind of strategies or solutions that are actually going to do what they think it's going to do.
Chelsea, is this an insoluble problem? Like you just can't solve it. It's always going to exist. It always has existed. It's just a matter of you help as many people as you can, because as you guys have both said, I ride my bike downtown all the time. I encounter 20 plus homeless folks on my ride around the mile square. Some of them I recognize from multiple years living in Fountain Square. So, how do you try to solve a problem that in some ways just can't be solved? Or tell me, yes, it can be solved, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to what do we say when we say we're going to solve homelessness, right? Homelessness as a big issue is really driven by a lot of factors like housing markets, like gaps between income and rents and things like that, that we can solve if we make different policy decisions. But it is a much larger issue. And so when we talk about solving, we try to break it down into smaller components, right? So what can we solve? We can solve street homelessness. We can say nobody should be living and dying on our streets. So how do we make sure that there are clear, accessible places for people to access emergency shelter or housing so that nobody is relegated to sleeping under the bridge or in an encampment by the river or in their car? We can solve street homelessness. We can also solve what we call chronic homelessness, people who have experienced long-term, multiple episodes of homelessness that often have a disabling condition, mental illness, a physical health condition, those that have really high vulnerabilities that without a housing intervention or service intervention are just not going to be able to get out of homelessness. And when we look at it in that lens, we can get to a place where we can say our community does not have street homelessness because we've created places for people to come inside, get access to housing. We don't have people who are stuck in homelessness year after year. But can we say we can get to a nobody ever experiences homelessness in a community ever? The frank answer is not in this economic and policy environment. We would have to make some serious changes to housing policy. We'd have to make sure that incomes keep pace with rising rent rates. We would have to have stronger tenant protections. So there's a lot that would have to be done to get to nobody experiences homelessness.
So is the conservative nature of the state a hindrance?
I don't think that it is. And I'll say in the veteran space, it's a little bit different. But for the last about 15 years, there's been a concerted effort to end veteran homelessness. And to Chelsea's point, that doesn't mean that no veteran will ever become homeless. It means that we've built a system so when a veteran falls into homelessness, he or she can quickly access services and get into housing.
Yeah.
And we're well on our way here in Indianapolis to doing just that. Over the last 10 years, there's been a 70% reduction in veteran homelessness here.
Yep.
And, we keep pushing forward. So, I mean, it's just Ash Wednesday. So Jesus said you would always have the poor with you. We will always have people struggling in our community, but we have to have a system to rescue them when they fall into homelessness.
Is it fair to say that veteran homelessness is not looked upon as perhaps substance abuse homelessness?
I
I
think
mean, they put homeless vet on the sign for a reason.
I think there's a lot of sympathy for veterans, and it comes from a place of gratitude. You're a history guy. I am as well. Indiana has always honored our veterans. We have acres and acres downtown dedicated to remembering and honoring the sacrifices made in our behalf. And so when a veteran faces homelessness, I think there's a lot more compassion for that person on the street. Veterans face homelessness for the same reasons that non-veterans do. The number one is unemployment, lack of affordable housing, mental health, diagnosis, substance use, physical health. All those things are in common between veterans and non-veterans. We've just built a system for veterans because there's more public will to be able to support them.
And it's somewhat counterintuitive, right? I joined the Army in 1987 because I couldn't afford college and I didn't know what the hell I was going to do with my life. And so when you go through the military, one of the aspects of it, in my case, the Army, you come out of it as you want to like, okay, now I have my goals. Now I have a little bit of money, GI Bill or whatever. I'm more disciplined. I'm more mature. So I'm ready. And so the idea that that sort of stint, that sort of decision leads to homelessness is somewhat, I would think, counterintuitive.
It's really interesting. Veterans are more likely to be homeless than non-veterans, especially women veterans, who are the fastest growing segment of the homeless population. And the data is fascinating because there are a lot of veterans just like you, Robert. They joined, maybe needed a little direction. They found that along with discipline in the military, and they do very well. So veterans are more likely to have college degrees. They're higher wage earners. They're more stable. Veterans are also more likely to be homeless, to face food insecurity, have a higher suicide risk, and risk of mental health diagnosis. So something happens in the military. And what we're kind of finding in the data that we're collecting in our mental health team is that there's a lot of childhood trauma that isn't resolved. So just a theory of mine is people join the military to get away from whatever it is at home that is, difficult to navigate. And then when they get out of the military, they realize they haven't really addressed those underlying issues and they continue to struggle.
Combat related
Sometimes.
homelessness and TBI and
I think, all of that is a factor. We had a solid about 15 years of deployments in combat. And even if you didn't see anything traumatic, that's really hard on families and individuals to have that kind of routine. We also see a lot of military sexual trauma for both men and women. There's several factors that go into it.
Chelsea, if I may.
Yep.
Is part of your pitch for assistance, we can't just help veterans who are homeless? You get to where people are like, okay, he served in Iraq, he served in Vietnam, he served whatever, he should be on the street, she shouldn't be on the street, however that works. And people are more inclined, I think, to say, well, you did something for us, I need to do something for you. In your situation, taking the veterans part out of it, because I know you help veterans too, do you have to say, look, I know you want to give to HVAF, or I know you want to help veterans only or whatever, but these folks deserve your attention as well?
Yeah, I think just focusing on veterans and again, we're learning a lot from what's working in the veteran space that can be replicated to other populations that are experiencing homelessness. But I think it's a real slippery slope to get into the deserving versus not deserving, right? So our pitch, if you will, is that we believe housing is foundational. Housing is a human need. Nobody can thrive without housing and a stable place to be, a safe place to be, a dignified place to be. Again, housing is at the foundation of everything else. You cannot grow your income and improve your employment if you don't have a stable place to be. You cannot connect with healthcare resources if you don't have a safe place to be. You can't have a stable family if you don't have a stable place to be. And so when we're talking about homelessness, it doesn't just apply to helping veterans. We're also looking at young adults that are experiencing homelessness, families that are probably one of the most invisible faces of homelessness, moms with kids, people fleeing domestic violence. We can't just say, well, veterans are the only ones worthy or deserving of assistance or access to housing. We believe everyone should have access to housing and the access to the foundation and stability of home because that's the only way you can thrive.
You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies. Our guest today, Dr. Chelsea Haring-Cozzi. She is the Chief Executive Officer for the Coalition for Homelessness Intervention and Prevention. Emmy Hildebrand. She is the Chief Executive Officer for Helping Veterans and Families. And before I forget, Emmy, tell the Leaders and Legends podcast audience about your podcast plans.
We have a podcast at HVAF that we call Roger That. We are getting ready to launch our third season. It will actually start at the end of March on Vietnam Veterans Day, with our first guest this season being a Vietnam veteran, Steve Peck, who's one of the founders of HVAF. He's son of actor Gregory Peck, and he has had a long career serving his fellow veterans and advocating to end homelessness for veterans. So we're really excited to have some good guests this season to dig into some policy issues that from the local all the way to the federal level and, make sure that we honor our veterans and educate our listeners at the same time.
What's the name of your podcast?
Roger That.
Where may I find it?
You may find it wherever you listen to your podcasts. It's hosted on Spotify, but we're also going to post it on YouTube and Facebook as well.
Can I have the doc on your podcast?
I should. Yeah.
Happy to do so.
We started by talking about legislation. We got a little bit away from that. So let's go back to it for a minute, please. If passed, how will this legislation make your work more difficult?
So a good part of our work is connecting with veterans and inviting them into the services that we offer at HVAF, which are a variety of services. We offer housing in a way that meets the need of the veteran. We also offer employment services and mental health services and basic need assistance through our pantries. But one of the core components that we do is street outreach. We have a veteran who is previously homeless himself. He spends his work day going out across our city to camps, shelters, individuals on the streets, connecting with them and inviting them into HVAF. So obviously, I think when he connects with them now, he needs to be reminding them that they can't stay in a public place, that they're at risk of criminal penalties and fines if they do. And then part of our work, we work with veterans to find apartments, and that often includes a criminal background check and a credit check. So now they're going to have misdemeanor charges and potentially unpaid fines that would delay their ability to obtain housing. Same with employment. Most employers run a background check and they're going to see that right away. And that could be, an additional barrier to getting a job that would lead a veteran to be able to sustain his or her family.
And it really has the potential to drive people further and further into hiding, which makes it hard to then have a service connection, right? So this is really targeted at individuals who are outside experiencing unsheltered homelessness, who can be some of the most vulnerable individuals who have been often failed by so many systems and people throughout the years. So, in order to even connect folks with services and get that engagement, there's some trust building that has to happen, some consistent relationship building so that individuals know, like, we're actually here to help. We're going to follow through on the commitments. To engage somebody in the housing process, it takes about 30 days because people who are outside often don't have legal documents to even get to a lease signing. They don't have IDs, social security cards. All of that has to happen to move somebody into a housing pathway. And teams are going out, outreach teams, to continuously connect with people, work on those things, get them to the BMV, get everything, the trust building, all of that. And if somebody has to continuously keep moving to not be cited or charged with a Class C misdemeanor, it could potentially disrupt those service connections, drive people further and further into hiding, making it harder to find and connect people and get them onto a housing pathway. And then if those fines do accumulate, you're talking about folks who don't have the ability to pay the fines. So that could result in a warrant and a court appearance, which you're talking about folks that don't have access to mailboxes and things. So that could escalate into greater justice involvement. Again, that then creates barriers to housing, employment. It's often probably going to be a nonprofit that has to help pay those fines, taking vital resources away from housing and services. It's not going to achieve what I think I hear legislators saying they want. And that's we want people to be connected to services. We don't want people dying on our streets. We don't either. But sending them into the criminal justice system is not the answer. It's not the right direction.
And we're gonna talk about the sheriffs here in just a second.
Yeah, I just was going to add to that. The thing I struggle with the most is that we simply do not have enough resources to serve people. At HVAF, we have a waiting list of about 80 veterans waiting on transitional housing. We have 103 beds, they're full. We have a rental assistance program we serve about 400 families a year through. We have a wait list of 60 veterans waiting on that resource. So I struggle to understand how, when we haven't created enough housing opportunities, how we could think about penalizing people for living outside when there is no other choice. So, my request has been like, let's consider investments that work. And we know what that is. It's housing with supportive services. Let's do that first. And if we have empty beds all over the city and people living outside saying, I won't go there, then we can think about something different.
That's not the reality. Yeah, I mean, there's this perception that we continue to kind of fight against that, well, people just choose to live outside. People don't want to connect to services and housing. And we couldn't find that further from the truth. So, I mean, we've been learning a lot through the Streets to Home Indy initiative, which is a direct encampment and streets to housing initiative that we've raised local money for. We're housing people directly from the streets. We've housed over 100 people in the last several months. We've closed several camps. And what we're learning is that there is over a 90% engaged housing rate. That when somebody realizes there is a real offer being made to get off the streets and into a place of stability, they're saying, yes, absolutely, I want that. I want to get on a path to stability. What may not be a real offer is, well, can we get you into a shelter? Many people can't access shelter or aren't going to do well in shelters that are hundreds of people.
And shelters have a bit of a stigma.
Right. Right.
I mean, for the person, right? Well, am I going to feel safe there? Especially if I
Right.
imagine if I was a woman, I'd be like,
Absolutely. And shelters actually don't end someone's homelessness. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to end someone's homelessness with a permanent solution. And again, it takes about 30 days, which is actually pretty quick to do that. And it's a real offer. Whereas, again, shelters are life-saving, shelters are important, but they are often full. They often have barriers to entry, so not everyone can access them. If you have a pet, you're not going to be able to go in with your pet. And for some people, that is their safety net. If you're in a coupled situation, couples are often separated because shelters are often gendered. There are just a lot of reasons why shelter isn't the right pathway or the answer for folks outside. And what we're trying to say is there are other pathways, and housing is the most effective one.
is it fair to say that the issue of homelessness, which has been around time immemorial, I think it's fair to say it really sort of exploded as an issue in the 80s. Mitch Schneider, who was a famous homeless advocate in D.C., that more resources, public, private, philanthropic, are dedicated to the homelessness crisis than ever before. So then if I said money's not the answer to your problem because you have more than you've ever had, Emmy, what would you say? You can call me names. I mean, you can say whatever you want, but I mean, if it's like you've got more money, it's the argument they make about IPS. It's the argument they make about, various other services, and especially where government's involved.
I mean, I would say I don't know that it's real money if you consider inflation and all those other things, but the cost of living is also dramatically increased in these last 25, 30 years. And, most Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Most Americans are one crisis away from losing their housing anyway, whether that's a lost job or maybe it's an unexpected medical bill.
Nearly 50% of Americans could not write a check for $500 for an unexpected emergency, and that's been true for decades.
Mhm.
Right. And those emergencies happen every day. And we see it at HVAF, veterans who, they lost their job or they faced a health struggle and that led to their homelessness. I've heard more than one heartbreaking story of veterans who were fighting cancer and living in their cars, sleeping in the parking lot where they worked. Just to try to make it all work. So, yes, there is a significant investment in ending veteran homelessness, but it's also working.
Yep. I would say two things to that. I mean, to Emmy's point, money doesn't go as far as it used to. So, I mean, we've seen rent increases in Indianapolis upwards of 30 to 40% over the last 2 years. So, the money that's coming in is paying higher and higher rents, which is harder to serve more people than when you're paying more for a single individual's rental assistance. The other part is we have to be really strategic in the way money is used. And I think that's an important part is making sure that the money coming in is being used to support evidence-based interventions and that we're not spreading money far and wide, but we're doing some deep investment in the things that we know work to be able to take them to scale. And so it's not just about the money coming in, but it's about are we using it in the smartest, most effective ways? Are we leveraging various sources of money in the ways that we know work? Often funding that comes in can be really restrictive and may not support all of the things that we know it takes to move people from homelessness into housing. So it's really about strategic investment and investing in evidence-based things and recognizing that the money doesn't go as far as it used to because of all the increasing prices that we're seeing, particularly around rental rates.
Would you say that homelessness, both for veterans and non-veterans, is at a crisis level? However, in the common meaning of the word?
I think so. I think that's why the state feels compelled to act. I mean, you said it. You can't ride your bike around downtown without seeing multiple people struggling. And I would say that one person living outside in our city is a
Yep.
crisis. We need to mobilize and do something about that. And I'm really excited to see the progress made in the veteran space around the country. Several states and many cities have ended veteran homelessness, and I think it just shows that with the resources and the will, you can address this issue and you can save people's lives.
Dr. Haring-Cozzi, but is the rhetoric you use, does it put you in a box in the sense that if it's always a crisis, then I'm going to go, well, then why the hell am I giving you all this money? Because it's a crisis like it was 5 years ago. But if you say, oh, it's not nearly the crisis it used to be, then my response is, then why the hell am I giving you all this money? Because I can do other things with it. Is that a paradox that you live with as a person in an organization every day?
I mean, it is, but I think the way we think about that and address that is working together as a community to set some common goals. What is the vision? What are we trying to actually achieve together? And I think without a clear vision, it does become this kind of paradox. And so that's part of, for example, what we're trying to do under the Streets to Home initiative is to say, okay, where is a place we can start? That we can really align a vision around, align resources around, show measurable impact, and then start applying that other places. So with Streets to Home, it is the vision that we can get to a community where nobody's living and dying on our streets. We've created effective and efficient ways to move people directly off the streets into housing and make our system work more effectively, right? So that people in crisis are not relegated to the streets, that they can move quickly from crisis back into a place of stability, and to line up resources around that.
Take just a
That's
minute,
what it
please,
takes, yeah.
to describe that initiative in a little more detail.
Yeah, so Streets to Home it's a multi-year, multi-phase initiative that is really focused on ending street homelessness and chronic homelessness. Again, kind of simply defined, are those who have experienced long-term homelessness or lots of episodes kind of cycling in and out of homelessness that have a disabling condition. So really pretty vulnerable folks that really need some kind of intervention to get out of homelessness. These are two areas we very much believe we can make measurable and meaningful impact if we align around a vision and align those resources. Phase one of Streets to Home is focused primarily with those on the streets, in encampments, and in areas like the downtown business district. And so the commitment is to house 300 to 350 people directly off the streets into housing with supportive services and do it over a 12-month period. So we've crossed a big threshold. We've housed over 100 people so far. As we do that work, we also then close areas after everyone has been housed from the area and reactivate and maintain that public space for whatever its original uses was. You maybe have seen the biggest example here with Leonard Street encampment,
Correct.
but that's part of our work is nobody should be living and dying on our streets. Can we all align around that vision? Great. Let's line up the will to do it. Let's line up the resources to it and let's get to work. So it's a very coordinated, very intentional process for doing that work across the city. And that's what it's going to take. And we can take that and then we can apply that to chronic homelessness. We can apply that to a lot of, I mean, we learned this from the veteran space, is if you have a really focused effort, a focused set of goals and targeted resources, you can make very meaningful impact.
I just want to go back to your question real quick, Robert, about the paradoxes created. I think the need can be great, but it's really incumbent upon nonprofits to show that they're effective. So,
Mhm.
you have to have both things, I think, to be deserving of public investment or a private donation. And that's what we try to do at HVAF. We try to offer, time limited, effective assistance that moves veterans into self sufficiency as quickly as possible.
You are listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today, Dr. Chelsea Haring-Cozzi. She serves as Chief Executive Officer for the Coalition for Homelessness Intervention and Prevention. And Emmy Hildebrand, she serves as CEO of Helping Veterans and Families. I'm going to ask you this question, Emmy. Your answer cannot be Richard Lugar.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess almost Mitch Daniels too, but she worked for Senator Lugar. So is there a particular Hoosier leader and or legend you admire most?
This is unfair. I have to say Richard Lugar.
Didn't you see the unfair space sign as you
I
walked in
didn't.
the door?
There's not an explicit warning on this studio door. So I will say Richard Lugar and buy some time to think about somebody else. But I felt so fortunate to start my career with him, someone who cared about Indianapolis and Indiana and the entire world. And I just was in awe that, one, I got to work with and for him, but even the talented people on his staff. I'm a girl from small town Indiana, and I was blown away working with people like Keith Luce, who had made multiple trips to North Korea to try to, negotiate. And one thing that he did that I was really honored to be a part of, every time he would take a trip to Korea or Vietnam, he would take a list of people from Indiana, POW, MIAs that were still missing, and ask for updates on every single one of them. So I would often supply that list and we would coordinate that. So just to be a part of that public service was incredible. So number one will always be Richard Lugar, of course.
Of course. 90% of the time, the answer is Jim Morris, Richard Lugar, or Mitch Daniels. And that's probably no coincidence that they all.
No, I agree. I tell people
years.
all the time that all good things are traced back to Dick Lugar. The people that are in that universe are all dedicated public servants that have gone out and made huge change in Indiana and in the world.
So I am not a native Hoosier.
You want to
My
throw
dad,
in a Michigander?
I am a Michigander. My dad did grow up in Indiana, a very small town, Francisville, Indiana. Don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I am not. So I've only been here since 2016. So I guess I'll give the diplomatic answer in that we are willing to work with all leaders here in Indiana and would welcome the opportunity to work across aisles to really come up with some, to not come up, we know the solutions, but to really help scale and expand the solutions to homelessness here in Indiana.
Michigander, leader or legend?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that I have a good answer for that.
Gerald Ford?
Sure. Sure.
When you work in the nonprofit space, I don't do a lot of PR for the nonprofit space. There are people who are just like better at it than I am. Kelly Bailey, I'm talking to you. And is it tough when there is not a bottomless pit of money? There has to be competition for funds. How do you work together yet say, we're doing really well over here. We probably could use an extra million. Is that is that a barrier to any sort of solution? And that's more than just your two organizations, right? There's obviously others. How do you navigate that potentially torturous
Well, I would say that America is a very wealthy country, and donors have interests that are across a wide spectrum of interests. And in the veteran space, we have people who are veterans and want to support their fellow veterans. We have people who are not veterans who want to offer their gratitude to veterans, and that will prompt a donation. So I think nonprofit fundraisers, the one in HVAF in particular, are excellent at finding people who care about their causes. And even though there's similarity, they're not exactly the same.
So I would push back against this notion that we're all in competition with one another. I mean, I think we do a really good job in Indianapolis of coming together and collaborating and knowing what value we all have to bring to the table. We all have value add in this work and we all contribute something that's essential to moving these strategies forward. And so I think our approach is to always highlight the partners that we're working with, highlight the good work that's happening in the community, because this no one agency alone can address this issue. It does take all of us. And that's the message we share with funders. We like to highlight the organizations we work with that we know are doing good and impactful work. We're happy to tout them in conversations and to share that information and to continue that message that, like, we're all doing this work together and let's continue to uplift each other and make sure we all know our own value add to this work. And so we never approach this from a place of competition. We know we can stand with here's what CHIP does, here's what we bring to the work. And for those that really want to advance system work, and that's part of what we do, then please let's work together. But we are also always happy and willing to recommend other organizations that are doing great work in our community.
And I think there's a tremendous amount of support in our community as well. Chelsea is one of the very first people that reached out to me when I became CEO at HVAF. And I think now for 5 years, we've been meeting the second Monday of every month for coffee and just to support each other through this. She comes to our annual fundraiser. I go to her annual fundraiser. So there's a lot of, I think, camaraderie here because we have similar missions. We want to end homelessness in Indianapolis, and we're going to do it together.
Yep.
Chelsea, your background's in education. Obviously, higher education level, the more you make. I'm sure there's some sort of causation there that's not right out in front of me. How do you work with educational foundations and organizations to try to prevent the fourth grader from becoming homeless in 20 years?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest predictors of homelessness is a childhood experience of homelessness, right? And so the work that's happening much further upstream is critical to impacting what we're working on now with people who are already experiencing homelessness. So again, there are great organizations in our community that are doing that more upstream work with schools, with education foundations to say, let's identify the kids and families that are struggling now before they get to a place where they're experiencing homelessness and that cycle begins. So that upstream work I think is so critical. I don't want to start shouting out organizations because I'm always afraid I'm going to forget one. But that is a key part of this work because by the time folks get to us, they're in the homeless response system already. It's a uphill battle then. And the more we can prevent anyone, particularly families with children, from experiencing homelessness, the greater impact that we'll see.
Is it fair to say for you, the intervention part of your organization's name is more important than the prevention or the other way around, or are they equal? You're talking about we need to get to them before they get to the street. We need to get to them before all this sort of things. So, how do you get them before? How do you know I'm going to be homeless? And like, I want to help you before it happens.
Yeah, I mean, I would not say one is more important than the other. I mean, frankly, the best way to end homelessness is to prevent it from happening in the first place for a family or a household. I think a lot of that work and where that work is happening is in the schools directly and with the McKinney-Vento liaisons and things like that. Like there are resources embedded in schools that help identify families that are maybe on the cusp that are struggling, that maybe aren't quite what we would call literally homeless yet, but couch surfing, staying with family and friends to start that intervention before it becomes a homeless experience. And so they do that by connecting them with lots of different organizations, resources to really help prevent that homeless experience.
You mentioned being a small town girl. the sort of pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality is in the DNA of Americans going back centuries. When you see people, is it tough to get past the sort of maybe initial reaction of, I grew up poor. I did what it took. I don't live in the street. I'm not doing drugs. Is that a barrier for assistance? But also, is it like a legit, like we don't scold people because they've done well in life and don't feel like other people perhaps are trying as hard, or however you want to phrase it.
I would push back just a little bit and say that I think in all of our lives, there's been a person who extended a hand at one time or another that made all the difference. I am a small town girl. I grew up poor. I got a full ride scholarship to DePaul University that changed my life. I am a living proof that somebody saw me and saw potential in me, and it changed my life. DePaul connected me to Luger. Luger connected me to everything. And you know, I don't look down on people who haven't had that hand extended just yet. And I would, encourage everybody to think about the blessings they have in their life and the
But
people
is
that
it
put that in
looking
place.
down? If I say I grew up on public assistance, I did what it took to be successful. If somebody chooses to a different path, however defined, and they end up on the street, I have some empathy and sympathy for them. But at a certain point, it's up to each individual to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, which is so American. Chelsea?
I think there's an assumption we need to call out in that it assumes everybody has boots with straps to start pulling up, and that they're starting with the same kind of basic tools to be able to do that. And that's a false assumption. I think to Emmy's point, the structure of opportunities is different for different people. We can start to talk about race. We can start to talk about all of the other things that have people stacked very differently in our communities and our economy in terms of access to opportunities, access to the kinds of tools to be able to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Again, you have to have boots to start with. So there's no looking down on. It's, I think, a recognition of the structure of opportunities, the structure of resources in American culture have always been inequitable. People are not starting with the same foundations and resources. And so, you know, if people don't have the network of supports and resources for when they fall on hard times to be able to have that safety net, that's what these resources are for.
Is that one of the reasons you think that maybe veterans get special, more sort of warm attention because they have done something? They have taken that intermediate or intervening step. Hey, I was served for 5 years. So, it's not like I was robbing banks for 5 years. I served, and people are more like to go, well, they tried to do something at least.
I think that's a good part of it. But I would just encourage people. One of the things that I love to do every year is volunteer for our annual point in time count. It's a census that Chelsea and Chip lead in the community to just determine the number of people experiencing homelessness. So I've done it several years in a row now. I've done it down at Garfield Park a couple of times, just close to my house at Central Library. And every time I'm just wrecked by the humanity of everyone I encounter. Young people, old people, people that are just, I lost my job. I met a guy at Central Library this year who moved back to Indy to donate his kidney to his sister, and he just didn't have a place to stay, so he was staying shelter. I think if you encountered on an individual basis a person experiencing homelessness, it's a lot harder to think of them as those people. It's people just like us who had a life crisis. Last year, I met a girl and I nearly cried. She was probably 19, maybe 20. And she slept outside the night before on a very, very cold night. And I asked her why. And she said, because I'm like running away from domestic violence. Are we going to look down on her and say, well, just get it together and get off the street? No. You can't do that when you're eye to eye with another human being who's facing a
Right.
life struggle that they just need a little bit of help to get out of.
Right.
Chelsea, you mentioned Leonard Street
Mm-hmm.
a few minutes ago. I rode my bike through there many times. It was beyond depressing and distressing. When the news media, for example, turns their cameras and their ink toward a concentrated sort of area of homelessness, right? And all the things that come with it. Drug abuse, you can say chicken, you can say egg, whatever you want to say. Is that helpful for you or does that hurt your cause?
I'll say it's a both and. So I think the media plays a very important role in keeping issues like homelessness front and center on the public agenda, right? And making sure that people are aware of it and paying attention to it, and that we're not just pushing this issue under the rug, right? So we have great partnerships with media, and I think they can be really helpful. I think where it becomes harmful sometimes is when it's turned into a sensationalized soap opera, where it's like, we're going to follow this every step of the way and not maybe tell the humanity behind what we're seeing if it's not done in a fair and balanced way, if it's a skewed perspective. And I'm not saying that's what happened. I think there's a balance that has to be struck in terms of making sure there's awareness of an issue, covering it responsibly, making sure that it's covered with accurate information and data and human stories, and not done in a way that's sensationalized or that frankly has misinformation in it.
Did you see an uptick of people calling saying, "Hey, how can I help on this? Like I had no idea where Leonard Street was or is, but I'm seeing this. How can I be helpful?" Are there things that we mentioned the word crisis before, or I mean, Rahm Emanuel, never let a
Mhm.
crisis go to waste.
Mhm.
I mean, is that a thing?
I mean, I do think things like that create more awareness among people that aren't in it every day or don't see it maybe every day, and they start to ask more questions. I love a curious person that says, "I just read this. I need to learn more. I need to understand what's going on here." And I do think some of the coverage sparked that. Following Leonard Street, there was a big town hall meeting at Southeast Community Services. It was one of the highest turnouts they said they've ever had for a community meeting. That's not a bad thing. I want people to be curious. I want people to show up and say, "Help me understand what I'm seeing, help me understand what's going on, and then help me understand what my role in this could be. How could I contribute to being part of something that ends this, that solves this?" And I will say over the last year, we have seen a much greater increase in congregations, in the faith community, in just regular citizens getting engaged, getting more involved, and saying, not just, "Here's what I think would be helpful," but asking the question, "What would be helpful? What can our church do? What can we do as citizens?" I think that's evident at the advocacy happening at the State House even. I mean, we've seen just citizens showing up testifying against this bill, citizens calling their legislators saying, "Look, I've been learning a lot about homelessness this last year, and this is not right. This is not what we should be doing." So I do think the media coverage can really help get this to a broader audience and get more people to be curious about how they can engage.
One aspect of the Leonard Street coverage, and I agree with you. I thought the media played it really right down the middle.
Yeah.
They really did. Was the fact that there was a woman trying to sell her house right across the street from the encampment. Am I bad? Am I heartless if my sympathy is with her more than the people in the encampment?
I don't think so. Life is really complicated and we're all homeowners and we hope our home value continues to increase because that's how we're going to preserve wealth for our children. I totally understand that. But I think you can want better for your street, but also want to do right by the people who are unsheltered in your area too.
And, I think that we have to stop polarizing things because it's how do we see it from both perspectives? I understood her frustration. I understood where she was coming from. And it has to be a both and. And I understood that all of the folks along Leonard, nobody wanted to be living like that. People were getting pushed further and further into areas and couldn't find, where can we be? We keep just getting moved around and moved around. Where is a safe place that we can be so that we can start engaging in services? And I think where we get into a dangerous situation as a society and community is if we feel like we have to line up on one side or another.
Mhm.
Where we're going to make progress is understanding all sides of it, understanding the woman's perspective, understanding the unhoused neighbor's perspective, and saying, how do we all come together to figure out a good path forward and listen to each other? There's no wrong in any of this. And I think that's where we really get into trouble when we start saying, no, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. It's really trying to understand and listen to where each other's coming from and finding a good path forward.
I agree. I think when people think about homelessness, they think about homelessness as an issue, but it would be really helpful if we all thought about homelessness as people. I learned last fall, we housed a veteran and we profiled him in our newsletter. And I looked at him and I was like, I know him. It was the guy I went to high school with in Greencastle, Indiana. And I reached out to his case manager and I said, I just want to check in on him. He may not remember me. It's been a minute since high school. But I went over to his apartment and we chatted. He did remember me. We went to church together too. So he knew all of my family and he asked
Mhm.
about them. But the saddest part for me was learning that he moved to Fountain Square the same year I did, 2008. I lived in a house at State and Span.
Mhm.
He lived under the bridge at 65 in Shelby. And for the whole 10 years that he was homeless, he was always within 1 mile of where I was living. And I couldn't believe it that this kid from Greencastle High School, from my church youth group, was right there in my neighborhood, and I never saw him, and I never helped him. And I just wonder how many times have we all driven by the person at the bottom of the interstate ramp or at the corner, and we don't really look at them because I think we have this idea that somehow if you lock eyes with somebody, it means something, like they might ask you for something or you might feel
Right.
compelled to do something. How many times did I drive by Rosario and not even see him?
Mhm.
And so that's what I try to remember to tell people is let's focus on the humanity of the person.
Yep.
It's not an issue. It's a person who is having the worst day of their life, and they don't need all of us to pile on and remind them of that.
I mentioned it a few minutes ago. Reading the coverage, excuse me, of the proposed legislation. It was interesting, not maybe a little bit surprising because I didn't think of it that way, but it was certainly informative that the sheriffs don't think much of this. It's like concealed carry, right? You think that, most cops have guns and are, perhaps maybe more conservative than liberal, but they came out completely against a
Yep.
concealed carry. When I worked on Suzanne Crouch's gubernatorial campaign, they were adamant that they were against it. In this situation, it may be budgetary or, the jails are not a solution. What do you think, starting with you, Emmy? What do you think of the sheriff standing up against this bill?
I think it's really important. I think you're right that people think that it's, organizations like ours that are the only ones that are opposed to this, but it's not
Mhm.
true. And we've heard from the Sheriff's Association, part of it is budgetary. The resources to house inmates are county resources, and local people have to sustain that. So part of it's budgetary. But I thought there was some really good testimony this week that jails are not equipped to become homeless shelters. They don't have the staff to take care of the basic needs of people or the mental health or substance use needs that might also be present. And it would be overwhelming to their
Mhm.
staff to be able to do that. I also thought it was incredible. Sheriff Forstall testified that it costs $5,100 to
Mhm.
house someone for 60 days.
Marion County
Um,
Sheriff Kerry
Mhm.
Forcell, who's running
yes.
for the Indiana Senate.
He is.
Yep.
But, we pay rent every month for veterans. So that's several months of rent.
Uh-huh.
So it's also just sort of mind boggling to me that we'd be willing to spend $5,100 on jail, but we're not willing to spend $5,100 just to house somebody.
And somebody that would just be discharged right back to where they came from into homelessness. So it solves nothing.
Are there statistics that, sorry, Spangle has consumption. I hope you feel better, Chris. You've been sick for so long. God love you. But that's what you get when you have little babies.
It's true.
You
It's
get
true.
sick all
All
the
the
time.
germs.
Is there any statistics that prove or debunk a causation between homelessness and criminal activity? In other words, could I sit here and make the argument, yeah, jails aren't equipped to be mental health or homeless shelters or whatever, but they are equipped to keep criminals behind bars so they're not stealing, murdering, beating, whatever.
Yeah, but so what does it do then if we make a new criminal class of people who are unsheltered? It's essentially moving to a direction where we're saying if you're unsheltered and you do not move along after a warning, that there's now a new criminal classification for you because you are unhoused. Um, and I understand that the legislature doesn't believe that's what it's saying, but ultimately it is. And I think that's where the sheriff's department and sheriff's association is
Right.
saying, we don't want to criminalize folks because they're unhoused. We are not a shelter. We are not the right place to drive people into. They're not going to be compelled into service because they're coming to the criminal justice system. And so I think that's a really important message from them, because what I hear legislators saying is, we just need to compel people to service. And we want to connect people to services too. We share that. But the criminal justice system is not the right pathway to compel people to service. And the Sheriff's Association is just confirming that.
So you would reject the argument if I was to make it right now. What you all are doing ain't working. So we got to come up with something else, which just seems to be it's sort of the genesis of this legislation. How would you push back on that? Would you tell an individual story about someone you met or knew or helped? Or would you statistics, all the above? Because the argument is, well, there are more homeless in downtown Indianapolis than there ever were. I worked for Mayor Ballard. I did interviews when we would take people out of homeless camps and put them in shelters or whatever. 4 degrees.
Mhm.
And we would get nasty calls, and I would just say, I'd rather sleep inside in February, but maybe that's just me. The pushback has to be what we are doing is work,
Mhm.
but this is also what we need to make it work even better. Is that fair?
I mean, I think the data shows that what we're doing in the veteran space is working. There's 70% fewer homeless veterans today than there were 10 years ago. It's happening across the nation. I think last year, nearly 50,000 homeless veterans were housed in the United States. So it is working. The data shows it, the personal
Mhm.
stories show it, and we know what works. It's housing with supportive services. As Chelsea mentioned, people are not going to be compelled to services if they're jailed. They'll just get out of jail and be no better off than they were 61 days earlier when they were arrested. So let's focus on offering an intervention that works before we think about punishments that are needed.
Chelsea, I'll give you a chance
Yep.
to have one last message before we ask Emmy about the fire and how they
Yeah.
have come back from that or coming back from that. One last message for the people in the General Assembly and in the government about this bill. What do you want them to know?
I want them to know, first and foremost, we want to be at the table. We want to partner. We want to work together on how we advance and scale the strategies that we know work across this state. We have not been invited to those tables in the ways that we've asked to be. So that's the first message. We know what works. We are the experts. Let's sit down and work together. There is a role for state government to play in this, and I'm happy to talk about what that role is. Senate Bill 285 is the wrong direction for Hoosiers. It does not set us on the right pathway. It actually sets back our work, and we really urge our General Assembly not to move that bill forward this year and to take the time to get it right.
Emmy, helping veterans and families had a significant incident just a few months ago, 6 months ago. When was it? I can't even remember now.
It's been about a year and a half now.
Okay, so it
Yeah,
happened in
October in 2024.
24, not
Mhm.
25. Thank you.
Yeah.
How have you come back from the fire there at your building on Pennsylvania? And what has the response been to help? And here's your chance to shout out Jennifer Wagner.
This is true. Jennifer Wagner is a great Hoosier and a great friend. So in late October 2024, our largest transitional housing properties, which we call Manchester Apartments, caught fire. It was an electrical fire. It was up in the attic. So unfortunately, it burned above the sprinklers. It got pretty big pretty fast. Jennifer Wagner lives very close to HVAF, and she got an alert on her Citizen app that there was a fire at HVAF. And so she texted me and said, "Hey, I think your building's on fire." And when I got her text, I'll be honest, we've had some small fires before. People burn things in the oven or on the stovetop. It brings out the fire department. It's a whole big thing. And so I was like, I'll get dressed and I'll just head that way and just check it out. And as I was going up 65, I passed like Michigan Street
Mhm.
and I could see a huge plume of smoke in the air. And that's kind of when I had that sickening feeling that this isn't jalapeno poppers or something
Yeah.
on a stovetop. When I got off the Pennsylvania Street exit, the street was blocked. There were multiple fire engines and water trucks. and it was just devastating. Veterans were evacuating. Thank God we practiced fire drills quite a bit, so they were all evacuating just as they should. Our on-call social worker was already there offering people assistance. And I just remember standing in the street, and one of the fire investigators said to me, "We might just burn this whole thing down tonight." And I stood there thinking, how will we ever come back from this? But I waited minutes to hear the answer to that because my phone started buzzing all night long. People calling and texting, "What do you need? How can we help?" We had one of our donors say, "I put my credit card on file at some extended stay hotel. If you need it, just go." So things like that really sustained us those first few days, and the community support was extraordinary. Thankfully, our insurance company has been good to work with outside of dropping us for our future coverage. Our adjuster has been great. So we were able to renovate half of the building and get it opened last year. So 23 units we opened in July of 2025, filled them up right away with veterans ending their homelessness. We will finish construction on the rest of the building in August of this year. And we're pretty excited because of the level of devastation, we've been able to completely redesign this part of the building. So we're adding 14 additional units of housing, and we're moving our food and clothing pantry over there, which will increase the size and allow for more freezer and refrigerator space and on-site storage, which we've never had. So we've taken some pretty bitter lemons, but are going to come out of it better equipped to serve veterans and knowing a little bit more about safety and crisis response and all of that as well.
Could have said Jennifer Wagner was the Hoosier leader or legend you admire most, or Bill Morrow, or the Morrow family for sure.
Yeah, the Morrow family has been great. Don Morrow is one of the founders of HVAF. He was our first full-time CEO. So I also love it because my very first public event for Senator Lugar was Veterans Day at the Indiana State Fair. And that was the idea of Bill Morrow, or not Bill, Don Morrow. So I was a very young 21-year-old staffer on Senator Lugar's staff and a nervous wreck. I'm pretty shy generally. And so Don was so gracious, was like, "It's okay. Like, just go out there, share the senator's greetings, and it'll be fine." So I was really excited to follow him to HVAF and feel quite a bit of, I guess, good pressure to live up to the legacy that he's left.
I will echo Bill Morrow and the Morrow family, too. They've been huge champions and advocates around homelessness.
Terrific family.
Yeah,
all the way around. If I want to find out more information about CHIP,
easiest thing is to go to our website at chipindy.org, or, we're around the corner. Come pay us a visit. Come over. Let's sit down. Let's get coffee. We have great coffee shops in and around Fountain Square.
Robert doesn't
I love
drink
a
coffee.
good coffee. Tea.
well, I was
whatever.
you put a sign in front of Hi-Fi, considering how many people line up there every night before a concert.
Absolutely.
Emmy, how do we find out more about helping veterans and families?
You can follow us on social media at HVAF Indiana across all platforms. Our website is hvaf.org. And of course, at the end of March, tune in for the new season of Roger That.
Your social media?
Yes, we are on social media too. So you can Chip Indy or Coalition for Homelessness will pop up either way. And that's a great way to follow us. We also have a couple newsletters. So you can follow us on our Chip newsletter as well, which is on our website.
We have reached the point on the Leaders and Legends podcast where everybody answers the same 5 questions. Chelsea, we'll have you go first on all of them. Is that fair?
Sure.
What was your first job?
Corn detasseling.
Are you sure you're not a Hoosier?
My parents dropped me off in Indiana at my grandma's house to go to corn detasseling.
Emmy?
I worked at a video store called Video Express in Greencastle, Indiana.
What was your first concert?
Rick Springfield. Yep.
Working Class Dog?
Yep, totally.
Emmy?
I think it was Garth Brooks at Market Square Arena.
Chelsea, if you could recommend any book for someone to read, which book would you choose?
Gosh, that's a stumper. Do you have a good answer yet? I don't know about that one.
Right now, I would recommend everyone read The Soul of America. I think it gets to the point that Chelsea made earlier, is that there are lots of times in our history when we've been very, very divided, but it's a pendulum and it swings back and forth. So we don't have to remain polar opposites on all of the issues. We can also just be Americans.
The author?
John Meacham.
Oh, John Meacham. Yeah, the historian, former journalist.
Gosh, I am stumped right now. I feel really terrible
Tale of
about
Two
this.
Cities.
I mean, that is a good one. I'm really drawing a blank on a good book to recommend.
I just finished Kenny Chesney's book. It was good.
About?
It's called Life, Heart, Music. It's
Mhm.
just a series of vignettes about his life that he says shaped it. So it's not really a biography, but there
Sure.
are like several little stories from his life that he wanted to highlight. It's good. I'm a little bit of a Kenny Chesney groupie. My best friend and I, we travel every summer to see him somewhere. So we saw him last year at the Sphere. So highly recommend the Sphere in Vegas. But the book really reinforced that he is the guy that you see on stage. The guy who tells you to come in and just for the next couple of hours, let your problems go. That resonates with me.
How about this? I was recently given a book by somebody I really admire and respect, The Alchemist. I haven't read it yet, but I'll come back to you and let you know if I recommend it.
Send me a note and
Okay.
I'll mention it in a subsequent
Okay.
podcast.
Okay. I failed on that one.
I just finished reading The Death of Trotsky, who gets
All right.
smoked in the back of the head with an ice pick.
That would not be a good way to go.
Well, it was the holiday season, so.
Just another family affair.
Number 4, Stalin, maybe the grudge holder of all grudge holders.
No, that's me. I'm pretty sure.
Number 4, that's why we get along. If you could witness any event in history, be there in person as it happens, which event would you choose?
Yeah, now I'm feeling like it's not fair I went first.
Well, if you'd worked for Lugar, I would let you go second, but you didn't. So.
Oh, dang it. What would that be?
And take your time. Chris will edit it.
You'll edit?
He'll edit the
Okay,
pause, yeah.
God, this is what happens at like 3:50 on a Friday afternoon. It's brain's like flappy. Throughout history, I'm thinking too hard about this. Do you have an answer? You go first then. I'm totally messing up your format.
We need to spend more time together, Doc.
I know, gosh. I'm not good with rapid fire.
I would say I would have loved to have been at the Kennedy inauguration. I mentioned I am a history person. I just think it was a time of such optimism that I wish our country was a little more optimistic right now. So
That's not what your country can do for you.
very much.
It was the coldest inauguration ever.
It was cold, but everyone was dressed very nicely. And
you got to see Robert Frost. You would have gotten to see Robert Frost.
Yes.
Yeah, if we're going, okay, that just will help me go a long line. I would say the inauguration of Obama. I was in Chicago in Grant Park election night. It was a magical, electric evening, and that would have been cool. Be there at inauguration.
Should note the famous video and pictures of the recently deceased Jesse Jackson with tears in his eyes as then President-elect Obama accepted the charge of the country.
Yeah.
Last question. If you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record just to chat, whom would you choose? And to make it easy for you there, Spartan, the number one answer to that question is Barack Obama.
Is it really?
Mhm.
I mean, that goes along with my last answer then, to just sit down. I mean, but I'd like Michelle to be there too. I mean, I want to sit down with the Obamas. And man, I feel like that would be a great dinner, some good music.
You're ending on a high note, like George Costanza.
Absolutely.
I would choose George W. Bush. He probably doesn't know it, but I feel like our lives are connected. I worked for Lugar handling all of his military and veteran stuff when the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were kind of at their height. And I felt like it changed the trajectory of my life. But I also appreciate how much he cares about service members. And I would love to talk more about that. I bought his art book. It's great.
And he's a real history nerd.
Yeah.
You have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise. We are also a federally certified, veteran-owned small business, registered with the state of Indiana and the city of Indianapolis. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of
P.E. McAllister.
Our guests today, Chelsea Haring-Cozzi. She is the CEO for Coalition for Homelessness Intervention and Prevention, and Emmy Hildebrand, who is CEO of Helping Veterans and Families. You've taken me on a different path today. We don't, like I said, do this, and we're going to make sure that it posts on the 23rd, which is Monday the 23rd, I believe, February. So we'll celebrate Washington's birthday. It's a very important subject, a lot of scholarship and emotion on every side. And Emmy knows this because I've told her several times, the work that you all do is so grassroots. It's so in the streets. You're looking people in the eye, and we're all rooting for you. No matter what our opinion is on the issue itself, your success is our success. Thank you for giving us some time today.
Thank you, Robert. It was great to chat with you and be with my friend Chelsea.
Same. Thanks for inviting me. Honored to be with you and have this conversation.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.